Ethan sat quietly in the command center of the spaceship, staring out the window into the vast darkness of space. The stars glittered in the distance, but his mind was far away. His thoughts were on the mission, a mission that had been carefully planned and executed. He was a soldier, trained for combat and survival, but this mission was different. This one was personal. Months ago, Ethan had been betrayed by the Vorthians, an alien race that controlled several systems in the galaxy. It had promised him assistance in a battle that would have given humanity an edge over their enemies. Instead, they had sold him out, leaving his team to die. Ethan had lost friends, comrades, and his trust in the Vorthians. Since then, all he wanted was revenge. His orders were clear: infiltrate their world, gather information, and sabotage their operations. But there was something else he had planned. The Vorthian princess, Lyra, was his key. She was the daughter of the Vorthian king, beautiful and powerful. Out to the galaxy, she was untouchable. To Ethan, she was the perfect leverage. He had been tasked with keeping an eye on her while gathering intel. But after meeting her, things had become complicated. Ethan had expected her to be like the rest of her people, calculating and ruthless. Instead, he found her to be intelligent, kind, and strong. Lyra was nothing like he had imagined. As he remembered his first meeting with her, a small smirk crossed his face. The princess had been in a room full of high-ranking Vorthians, her father included. Ethan had been there as a military advisor, hidden among the crowd. He had watched her speak, her voice calm but commanding. He had underestimated her. When their eyes met, Ethan had seen something unexpected in Lyra's gaze. It was not the disdain he had anticipated, but curiosity, perhaps even respect. It had shaken him, but he quickly pushed the feeling aside. Was there to fulfill his mission, not to make friends. Over the next few days, Ethan continued to work closely with Lyra. She was the one in charge of the defense strategies, and he was sent to help guide her. The more time they spent together, the more he saw how capable she was. She wasn't just a princess, she was a leader, someone who cared deeply for her people. It was clear that she was nothing like her father, but despite all of that, Ethan still held on to his anger. His need for revenge consumed him, and he reminded himself every day why he was there. He couldn't let the past go, not after everything he had lost. One evening, as the two of them worked late into the night, Ethan found himself alone with Lyra in the planning room. The air was tense, the silence between them uncomfortable. She looked up from her documents, her dark eyes locking onto his. "You're different from the other humans I've met," Lyra said, breaking the silence. Ethan frowned but didn't respond. He wasn't sure how to answer. She leaned forward, her face softening. "I don't understand why you're here. Why did your people send someone like you?" she asked. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He knew she was trying to understand him, but he couldn't let her get too close. He couldn't let his emotions get in the way. "I'm here to help you," he replied, his voice low. "I was sent to assist your people." Lyra studied him for a long moment, as if trying to read his thoughts. "I don't believe that. You've been sent here for another reason. I can see it in your eyes." Ethan's jaw tightened. He had to keep his focus. His plan was still the same. He would use her to get to her father. He would destroy the Vorthian Empire from within. Lyra would never know the truth until it was too late. "I'm not here to hurt you," Ethan finally said, though he wasn't sure if he believed his own words. Lyra stood up and walked toward him, closing the distance between them. There was a softness in her movements, a grace that Ethan hadn't expected. She reached out and gently touched his arm. "I don't want to be a pawn in this war," she whispered, "but I know I must do what's best for my people." Heart raced as she stepped closer. Could feel the heat between them, an undeniable tension. It was beautiful, powerful, and vulnerable all at once. But he had to remind himself why he was here. This was about revenge, not love. "I understand," he said, but the words felt hollow. The next few days passed in a blur. Ethan found it harder to maintain his distance from Lyra. She was always so kind, always so strong in her leadership, but it was impossible to ignore the spark between them. Every time their eyes met, it became harder to remember why he was there. His mission had started as a simple task of gathering intel. But now, with every passing day, it became more complicated. He still wanted revenge. But the idea of hurting Lyra, someone who had shown him kindness, made his stomach turn. One night, after a long day of planning, Lyra invited him to her private quarters. She had been working nonstop, and Ethan could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She offered him a drink, and they sat together, talking about everything and nothing. The conversation flowed easily, but the air between them was thick with unspoken words. Finally, after what felt like hours, Lyra stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the stars. Ethan watched her from across the room, torn between his duty and his feelings. "You're right," she said quietly, turning to face him. "You're not like the others. Something about you I can't quite understand." Ethan's heart skipped a beat as she slowly walked toward him, her gaze never leaving his. "I never wanted this," she continued, her voice barely a whisper. "But here we are." Before he could respond, Lyra closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that shocked him to his core. His heart raced, and for the first time he allowed himself to feel something other than anger. But as the kiss deepened, a cold thought flashed through his mind. This was part of his plan. This was just another step toward. Days passed since the night with Lyra. Ethan tried to keep his emotions in check, but he couldn't forget the kiss they shared. It was supposed to be part of his plan, just another move in his mission for revenge. But now, it felt different. Every time Ethan saw Lyra, his heart beat faster. He had been trained to keep a distance, to never let emotions cloud his judgment. But it was getting harder. He didn't expect to feel anything for her. She was the daughter of the very people who had betrayed him, yet there was something about her that made him question everything. Lyra, too, noticed the change. She had been cautious at first, but as the days went by, she felt herself drawn to Ethan. She could sense there was more to him than just the soldier she had first met. There was pain in his eyes, a deep sadness that he tried to hide. She couldn't help but wonder what had caused it. One evening, they found themselves alone again in the quiet halls of the palace. Lyra had been dealing with endless meetings and responsibilities, but she always made time to speak with Ethan. She felt a strange connection to him, something she couldn't explain. "Ethan," Lyra said, her voice soft but steady. "I don't understand. You come from a world that is so different from mine. Why are you here?" Ethan sighed, looking away. He had told himself over and over that he wasn't supposed to get close to her. But here they were, having a conversation that went deeper than he ever intended. "I'm here to help," he said. But his voice lacked the conviction it once had. Lyra raised an eyebrow. "Help," she repeated. "You came here as a spy, didn't you? I've seen the way you look at my people, like they're just a means to an end." Ethan's heart tightened. He couldn't lie to her anymore. The truth was that he had come to destroy the Vorthians, to use her as a tool to get back at her father. But now, the idea of betraying her felt unbearable. "You're right," he admitted. "I did come here to destroy everything your father built. But things have changed." Lyra was silent for a moment, studying his face. She could see the honesty in his eyes. It wasn't the first time she had heard such words from someone in his position, but it was the first time it felt real. She had always been told to trust in her people, to stay loyal to her family. But Ethan made her question everything she had ever believed. "I don't know what to think of you anymore, Ethan," she said quietly. "Part of me still sees you as the enemy. But another part of me... ... She paused, looking down, unsure of how to finish the thought. "Another part of you what?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with confusion and uncertainty. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said. "But I also don't know if I can walk away." Ethan took a step toward her, feeling the weight of her words. It was as if the walls between them were slowly crumbling, leaving him exposed. He had to make a choice, keep pushing her away and stick to his plan or risk everything by allowing himself to care for her. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I didn't expect any of this, Lyra," he said, his voice full of emotion. "When I first met you, I only saw a tool to get what I wanted. But now, I don't know what to feel. You've made me care about you in a way I never thought possible." Lyra's heart skipped a beat as she felt the sincerity in his words. She had known from the moment they kissed that there was more between them than just a simple attraction. But now, hearing him admit it, made her realize that maybe, just maybe, there was something real here. But she couldn't forget who he was or why he was here. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a man seeking revenge on her people. Could she ever forgive him for that? "Ethan, I don't know if I can trust you," Lyra said softly. "But I also don't want to walk away from something that might be worth fighting for." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding her hesitation. He didn't expect her to trust him right away, especially after everything that had happened. But he wasn't going to give up on her. Not now. "I'll prove it to you," he promised. "I'll prove that I'm not the enemy anymore. Show you that I care about you more than anything." The words hung in the air between them. There was no turning back now. They were standing at a crossroads, and neither of them knew what would come next. But for the first time, they both felt a sense of hope. A hope that something good could come from all the chaos they were living through. Over the next few days, Ethan and Lyra grew closer. They spent more time together, away from the prying eyes of the palace. They talked about their lives, their dreams, and the struggles they both faced. Lyra opened up about her fears of ruling, about the pressure of living up to her father's expectations. Ethan shared stories of his family back on Earth, of the quiet life he had once dreamed of before the war had taken it all away. The more they shared, the more they realized how much they had in common. Both of them had been shaped by loss and betrayal. Both of them had been forced to become someone they didn't want to be. But together they began to find a way forward. One evening, as they sat together under the stars, Ethan reached for Lyra's hand. She didn't pull away. Instead, she looked at him, her eyes filled with trust. "Even if she couldn't fully let go of her doubts, maybe we can find a way through this," she said quietly. Ethan smiled softly, squeezing her hand. "Maybe we can." For the first time, in a long while, he believed in something beyond revenge. Maybe, just maybe, they could build something. The days that followed were filled with confusion and uncertainty for both Ethan and Lyra. What had started as a plan for revenge had now turned into something neither of them had expected. Ethan found himself questioning everything he had known about himself, his mission, and his feelings for the princess. He had never anticipated this, never imagined that the lines between his duty and his emotions would blur in such a way. Lyra, too, was struggling. She had grown up in a world where duty to her people always came first. As the daughter of the Vorthian king, she had been taught to place the needs of her empire above everything else. But now, with Ethan by her side, she found herself torn. Between loyalty to her people and the growing bond she shared with him, she had always been strong, always believed in the ideals of her race. But now everything was changing. It wasn't long before the news of Lyra's pregnancy spread throughout the palace. The moment it reached her father, the Vorthian king, chaos erupted. The king, a cold and calculating ruler, could not tolerate such a union between his daughter and a human. To him it was a symbol of weakness, a betrayal of everything he had worked for. Lyra knew this would come. She had expected it, but the reality of it hit harder than she had imagined. Her father, furious beyond measure, called for an audience with her. She stood before him in the grand hall, her hands trembling at her sides. Ethan stood quietly behind her, knowing that the situation was about to escalate. "You have brought shame upon our family, Lyra," the king's voice thundered. "How dare you betray your people like this?" Lyra swallowed hard, holding her head high. "I haven't betrayed anyone, father," she said, her voice steady, despite the fear building inside her. "I did what I thought was right. I'm not the same as you, and I refuse to let my people live in the past. The king's eyes narrowed. You speak of the past, but you have no idea what you are doing. This human child, will only bring ruin to our empire. Ethan stepped forward, his posture firm but respectful. I didn't come here to destroy your empire, King. I came here for justice, but I'm not your enemy. The king's eyes turned to him with a cold fury. You are a traitor, a murderer in the eyes of my people, and you, he pointed to Lyra, are no longer my daughter.
You were a disgrace.
Lyra's heart broke. As her father's words cut through her, she had always wanted to prove herself to him, to show him that she could be a strong leader. But now she realized that nothing she did could ever change his opinion of her. He would never accept her. Not now, not after what she had done. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, offering what comfort he could. We can leave, Lyra, he said quietly. We can go somewhere safe, away from all of this. But Lyra hesitated. She couldn't abandon her people, not after everything that had happened. Despite her father's words, she still believed in the future of her people, in a future where humans and Vorthians could live together in peace. She just didn't know how to make that happen. I'm sorry, Ethan, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I need to fix this. I need to prove to them that I'm not a traitor. I can't leave them behind. Ethan looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He understood her need to stay, but he also knew that her decision would come with consequences. He had come here for revenge, but now he was faced with something more complicated than he had ever imagined: love, loyalty, and the struggle for peace. The next few days were filled with tension as Lyra tried to balance her responsibilities as a leader with her feelings for Ethan. The Vorthian court was divided. Some saw her as a hero, a woman who had the courage to love outside the boundaries of her people. Others, like her father, saw her as a threat to the empire. Ethan knew that his presence in the palace was dangerous. His very existence was a reminder of the broken trust between the humans and the Vorthians. He had to stay hidden, working behind the scenes to help Lyra with her plans. He wasn't sure how he could help her, but he knew he couldn't leave her alone. Meanwhile, Lyra worked tirelessly to convince the Vorthian people that her union with Ethan could bring about change. She spoke to the leaders of the various factions within the empire, trying to build support for her vision of a united future. It was hard, and many of the leaders were skeptical. But Lyra remained determined. She wasn't going to let her father's anger or her people's doubts stop her. As the days passed, tension in the palace grew. Lyra's father grew more desperate to undo the damage he believed had been done, and Lyra's supporters began to rally around her. The situation was reaching a breaking point. Ethan and Lyra knew that it wouldn't be long before the Vorthian king would take more drastic measures. One evening, as Lyra stood in her chambers looking out at the stars, Ethan approached her. He had been keeping his distance, trying not to interfere with her work. But he couldn't stand to see her so torn. You don't have to do this alone, he said gently, stepping into the room. I'm here for you, Lyra, she turned to him, her eyes filled with both gratitude and sorrow. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. I know what my father is capable of, and I don't want you to be caught in the middle of all this. Ethan stepped forward, taking her hands in his. I'm already in the middle of it, Lyra. I'm here because I believe in you. I believe in the future we can build together. Her heart swelled at his words. For the first time since the chaos had started, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe they could build something together. Maybe they could find a way to make peace. I don't know what will happen next, she said softly, but I won't give up on us. On this. Ethan smiled, his heart full of determination. Then neither will I. The future was uncertain, but in that moment, they both knew that they would face. The days after Lyra's confrontation with her father were filled with uncertainty. Her once stable world had begun to crumble, and every decision seemed to push her further from her father's approval. The Vorthian king's anger had reached its peak, and he was not a ruler who could be easily swayed. His only focus was keeping the empire under his control, and anyone who threatened that was an enemy. Lyra knew this. She had always known that her father's harsh rule left no room for mistakes, and any sign of weakness would be exploited. But what worried her more was Ethan. The king had made it clear that he saw Ethan as the greatest threat to the Vorthian Empire. She feared for his safety, even as she struggled with her own place in this fight for her future. Ethan, too, understood the danger. He had been trained to face threats head-on, but he was unprepared for what lay ahead in the heart of the Vorthian palace. Every step he took seemed to put him closer to the king's wrath. But his feelings for Lyra were strong, and they gave him a reason to keep going, even when things seemed impossible. One evening, Lyra stood on the balcony of her quarters, staring out over the palace grounds. The stars above were clear and distant, but they offered no comfort. She could feel the tension building, the weight of her father's disapproval pressing down on her. It was a familiar feeling, one she had carried for years, but now it was different. This time, it wasn't just about pleasing him. This time, her choices affected more than just her reputation. Ethan approached quietly, sensing the storm brewing inside her. He'd seen this side of Lyra before, determined leader who would never back down. But now, there was something in her eyes that he hadn't seen before. Fear, not for herself, but for him. "Lyra," Ethan said softly, walking up beside her, "you don't have to face this alone." She turned to him, her expression a mix of gratitude and worry. "I wish that were true, Ethan," she replied. But I can't keep you safe from my father's wrath. He won't stop until you're gone." "I don't care what your father wants," Ethan said firmly. "I'm not leaving. Not now, not ever." Lyra's heart ached at his words. She knew he wasn't just saying this out of loyalty to her. He truly meant it. And that scared her. She couldn't let him put himself in danger because of her. "Your life is worth more than my fight." "Ethan," she said quietly, "you don't have to sacrifice everything for me." "No, I'm not sacrificing anything," Ethan answered, his voice steady. "I'm choosing to stand by you. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision she had to make. She had spent so long trying to live up to her father's expectations, trying to please him. But now she realized that it wasn't her father she needed to fight. For it was herself. And Ethan. They were building something together. Something real. She couldn't let it be destroyed just because of her father's pride. The next morning, Lyra summoned a meeting with the leaders of the Vorthian Council. They had been growing more divided in recent days, with factions forming between those who supported Lyra and those who sided with her father. The time for diplomacy had passed. Lyra knew she had to take a stand, not just for herself, but for her future and for the future of the Vorthian people. Ethan stood beside her as they entered the council chamber. His presence was a bold statement to everyone in the room. Lyra was no longer a princess bound by her father's rule. She was a leader who would do whatever it took to protect those she loved. The council members stared at them, some with disdain, others with quiet curiosity. Lyra stood tall, facing them all. "I have called you here today because things cannot continue as they have," Lyra began, her voice calm but firm. "The Vorthian Empire needs a new direction, a new vision. One that does not come from the fear and control of my father, but from unity and strength." There were murmurs among the council members. Some exchanged glances, unsure of what Lyra was saying. But Lyra wasn't finished. "My father has ruled with an iron fist for far too long," she continued. "And now his actions have caused harm to the very empire he claims to protect. His war with the humans, his refusal to see the potential for peace, it must end. The time has come for change." A loud voice interrupted her. "You are a fool, Lyra. You would destroy everything your father built. You would weaken the Vorthian Empire for the sake of... what?" "A human." Lyra turned to face the council member, her eyes blazing with determination. "Yes, a human. And I will make you understand why. Ethan is not my enemy. He never was. He came here to seek justice, not war. And now, we must work together. The future of the Vorthians and the humans is tied together, and if we do not embrace this truth, we will all fall." The council member sneered. Our father will never accept this. He will never allow you to side with the humans. I don't need my father's approval, Lyra said firmly. I have made my choice. The question is, will you stand with me, or will you continue to let fear control us? There was a long silence as the council members looked at each other. Finally, one by one, they began to speak. Some voiced their agreement, while others remained silent, unwilling to choose sides. But in that moment, Lyra knew she had made her point. She had taken the first step toward change, and no matter the outcome, she would fight for it. Later that day, as Lyra and Ethan walked back to her quarters, Lyra's heart was heavy. The council had not fully embraced her vision, but they hadn't rejected it either. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. Ethan, sensing her uncertainty, placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did good," he said quietly. "You're doing what's right." Lyra smiled weakly, her thoughts still clouded with doubt. It's just the beginning. The hardest part is still to come. But as they stood there together, Lyra realized that maybe the hardest part wasn't the fight. It was the choice she had made to stand for what she believed in, no matter the cost. And with Ethan by her side, she knew she wouldn't fail. The tension in the palace had reached its breaking point. Lyra had made her choice. She had stood before the council and declared her vision for the future of the Vorthian Empire. But her father, the king, was not going to let go of his power. Without a fight, days that followed were filled with whispers and rumors. Her supporters rallied around her, while her father's loyalists worked to undermine everything she had worked for. Ethan stood by her side, as he had promised. He had become more than just a soldier to her. He was her protector, her partner, and her equal in the fight for a better future. But with each passing day, it became clear that the battle ahead would not be easy. The Vorthian king had already made threats to take action against Lyra, and he had the power to carry them out. Lyra had no illusions about what was at stake. She'd never wanted to be a queen for the sake of power, but she could see now that this was a battle for more than just her title. It was a battle for her people's future. The Vorthian Empire was crumbling under the weight of the king's greed and fear. If she did not take a stand, everything would be lost. One evening, as Lyra and Ethan sat in her quarters discussing their plans, Lyra couldn't help but feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. She had always been strong, but this was different. This was personal. This was about the future of her people and the future of her child. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she admitted, her voice low. "I've always wanted to make a difference, but this is more than I ever imagined." Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You're ready, Lyra," he said with confidence. "You've always been ready. You just had to find the strength inside yourself. And now you found it." Lyra looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. He had been her rock through everything. When the world seemed to be falling apart around her, Ethan had always been there, offering comfort and support when she needed it most. "But what if I fail?" she asked softly. "What if everything falls apart and we lose everything?" Ethan shook his head. "You're not going to fail. We're going to fight for what's right, together. And no matter what happens, we'll face it side by side. We're in this together, Lyra. You don't have to carry the weight of the world on your own." His words filled her with a sense of calm. She knew he was right. She had spent so much time worrying about the future that she had forgotten one simple truth. She wasn't alone. Ethan was with her, and together they could face anything. The next day, Lyra took the next step in her plan. She called for a meeting with the most influential members of the Vorthian military. It was time to make her case. She knew her father's loyalists would do everything in their power to prevent any kind of peaceful solution. But she had a chance to change things, a chance to unite her people despite their differences. The meeting took place in the grand hall of the palace. The Vorthian generals and commanders sat at a long table, their faces stern and unreadable. Lyra stood at the head of the table, Ethan by her side. The room fell silent as she spoke. "Vorthians," Lyra began, her voice steady and strong. "The time has come for us to decide what kind of future we want. For too long we've been led by fear and division. My father has ruled with an iron fist, but his way has only brought suffering and conflict. It's time for a new direction. The generals exchanged glances, some skeptical, others unsure. They had always followed the king's orders without question. Lyra knew that convincing them to stand with her would not be easy. Many of you have served loyally under my father, Lyra continued. I understand that, but I ask you to look beyond the past and see the future. A future where humans and Vorthians can coexist in peace. A future where we work together, not against each other. A future where strength is not measured by power, but by the willingness to build something better. There's a long silence as the generals considered her words. Ethan could see the uncertainty in their eyes, but he also saw something else. Hope. Hope that things could change. Hope that Lyra could lead them to a better future. One of the generals, an older man with a sharp gaze, spoke up. What you propose is dangerous, princess. You speak of peace with the humans, but they are our enemies. We fought them for years. How can you expect us to trust them? Lyra met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. I understand your concerns, she said, but I have seen the truth for myself. Ethan is not our enemy. He came here because he believed there was a chance for peace. He risked everything to help us, and now we have the opportunity to choose a different path. The general looked at Ethan, his expression hard to read. And what do you want from us, human? He asked. Ethan stood tall, meeting the general's gaze. I want nothing but peace. I've seen the destruction that comes from endless war. I don't want to fight. I want to destroy. I just want a chance for my people and yours to live in harmony. There was another pause, this one longer. The tension in the room was palpable. Finally, the general nodded slowly, as if coming to a decision. I cannot promise you that everyone will follow this path, he said, but I can promise you this. I will stand by you. If you truly believe in this, I will fight alongside you. Lyra felt a surge of relief wash over her. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a step in the right direction. She had convinced one of the key military leaders to support her cause. That was more than she had hoped for. As the meeting came to a close, Lyra and Ethan left the room together, their hearts filled with determination. They knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but they also knew that they had made a difference. They had taken the first step toward building a future where peace was possible. Thank you, Lyra said, turning to Ethan. I couldn't have done this without you. Ethan smiled, his heart full of pride. We're just getting started. And with that, Lyra knew that they were on the right path. The fight was far from over, but together they would face whatever came. The days after the military meeting passed quickly, filled with tension and anticipation. Lyra had taken the first steps toward uniting her people, but the road ahead remained long and uncertain. She had gained support from some of the key generals, but many of her father's loyalists still stood against her. The Vorthian Empire had been built on power and control, and changing that would not be easy. Ethan had become more than just her partner in the fight for peace. He had become her strength, a reminder that, despite the odds, they could build something better together. The more they worked side by side, the more Lyra realized that her love for him had grown deeper than she ever expected. In the midst of chaos, he was her anchor, and together they faced the challenges that lay ahead. One evening, as they sat together in her chambers, Lyra looked at Ethan, her mind filled with a million thoughts. They'd been planning their next steps, strategizing on how to win over more supporters, but her heart felt heavy. There was so much at stake, and the pressure to succeed was immense. Do you think we can actually do this? She asked, her voice quiet but full of uncertainty. Can we really change the future of my people? Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with determination. We can, Lyra. I know it seems impossible right now, but nothing worth having comes easy. You've already made a difference. People are starting to listen. They can see the truth in your vision. Lyra sighed, her gaze falling to the floor. But what if we fail? What if all of this leads to more fighting, more death? Ethan reached out, taking her hand in his. We're not giving up. Not now. Not ever. We've come too far to turn back. And even if things get tough, we'll face it together. Whatever happens, I'm with you. You're not alone in this. Lyra's heart swelled with love and gratitude. She had always known that Ethan was special, But now, in this moment, she understood the depth of her feelings for him. He wasn't just a soldier or a partner in their fight for peace. He was her equal, her heart, and her future. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "You'll never have to find out." Ethan replied softly, his thumb gently brushing across her knuckles. "I'll always be here." The bond between them had grown stronger with each passing day. But as much as they tried to focus on the future, there were still moments when the reality of the situation hit them. They were not just fighting for a new future, they were fighting against a powerful and determined enemy. Lyra's father, the king, would not give up his throne easily. He had already made it clear that he would stop at nothing to maintain control over the Vorthian Empire. The following week, Lyra and Ethan traveled to one of the outer Vorthian territories, a place that had long been under the king's control. It was there that they hoped to gain more support from the local leaders, hoping that the people who had seen the king's oppression firsthand would be more open to change as they arrived. They were met by a group of Vorthian leaders who had already pledged their loyalty to Lyra. They had been following her actions from afar and were eager to meet her in person. The meeting was tense at first, with many of the leaders uncertain about the outcome. They had seen the king's wrath firsthand and knew that siding with Lyra could bring severe consequences. But as Lyra spoke to them, telling them about her vision for a united future, a few of the leaders began to speak up. One by one, they voiced their support for her, echoing her belief that the Vorthian Empire could be stronger if they embraced change. Ethan stood by her side, watching as she inspired the leaders to take action. He could see the strength in her, the same strength that had first drawn him to her. And as the meeting came to a close, he knew that this was only the beginning. They had made a significant step forward. But there was still much to be done. "We've done it," Lyra said, a tired but satisfied smile on her face as they left the meeting. "We have their support." Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "You did it, Lyra. You showed them that peace is possible." Lyra stopped walking, turning to face him. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. "You've been with me every step of the way." Ethan smiled, his heart filled with love. "I told you, I'm not going anywhere." As they stood there, surrounded by the beauty of the Vorthian landscape, Lyra realized that they had come a long way since their first meeting. What had started as a mission of revenge had transformed into something far greater. "I love that." Transcended the boundaries of their worlds. Together, they had fought for something bigger than themselves. They had fought for hope, for the future, and for the belief that even the most broken empires could be healed. That night, as they settled into their quarters, Lyra reflected on everything they had accomplished. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, she felt hopeful. The support they had gathered from the outer territories was a strong foundation, and with Ethan by her side, she knew that they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they sat together, Lyra turned to Ethan, her voice filled with conviction. "We've made it this far, but we have a long way to go. I'm not backing down. We'll build the future we believe in, no matter what it takes." Ethan squeezed her hand, a promise in his eyes. "I'll be with you every step of the way. Together we'll make it happen." And in that moment, they knew that nothing could stand in their way. The future was theirs to create, and they would do it side